Alright guys, welcome back to Unit 3. This is day 10. So where we left off yesterday was shortly after Jefferson's election as president. He won the election of 1800. Now the outgoing president, John Adams, was of a different political party. John Adams was a Federalist and Thomas Jefferson was a Democratic Republican. And John Adams, being very upset after how terrible the election and campaign in 1800 had gone, wanted to figure out something he could do to block anything that Thomas Jefferson or other Democratic Republicans might try to do during his presidency, because they were a different party, so they had different views. He didn't want them to be able to accomplish the stuff that they were trying to make happen. So the night before Jefferson's inauguration, Adams's last night as president, he was up very late making all of these new judge appointments. And remember, it's the power of the president to appoint members to the judicial branch, not just the Supreme Court, but appellates courts, district courts, every federal court. So he's appointing all of these people to judging positions, people who he knows are going to be Federalists, people who he knows are going to try and stop or undo something that the Democratic Republicans do. And it's up to him to make sure that all of these appointments are delivered to these judges by midnight that night. So after he finishes writing them all, he gives one to James Madison, and he's supposed to be delivering it to a guy named William Marbury. But if you remember, James Madison was of a different political party. He was a Democratic Republican, and he didn't want this to happen. It might be legal what John Adams is doing here, but it's pretty sketchy and shady. So James Madison decides not to deliver the judge position to Marbury so that he doesn't get it in time so that he can't be a judge. Now, Marbury is pissed that Madison didn't give him his judging position, so he sues him, and that Supreme Court case will be Marbury versus Madison. I know during civics and economics, you have to memorize a long list of Supreme Court cases. This is usually the first case on the list. So ultimately, what the Supreme Court decides in this case is that none of this should have happened in the first place. We should have the whole structure here of the judicial branch needs a little bit of work. The president shouldn't be able to do all of this to sabotage his successor's presidency and things like that. So their ultimate decision in this case is that the Judiciary Act of 1789 is unconstitutional. That means that the Congress is going to have to write a new Judiciary Act, and it's going to be the Judiciary Act of 1801, and that will reorganize the judicial branch. Now that you're probably thinking, why is this important? Like, that's super specific and random. Like, why are we learning about this? The reason why the case Marbury versus Madison is important is because this is the first time the Supreme Court is going to declare a law unconstitutional. It's going to do something called establishing judicial review. Judicial review is where the judicial branch reviews a law and decides whether or not it's constitutional. So every single law that is going to be overturned by the Supreme Court after this moment is all because of the Supreme Court case Marbury versus Madison. So let's get into Jefferson's presidency. What do we know about Jefferson? We know he's a strict constructionist. We know that he wants a weak central government, and that's essentially what his whole presidency will be about. He's going to be working to keep the size of the federal government small, and he's going to do quite a few things that will accomplish that. He's going to reduce the size of the military. He's going to reduce the size of the executive department staff. He'll cut back taxes, tons of stuff like that. But one thing he will do that is actually the opposite and will actually increase presidential power as time goes on, will be the Louisiana Purchase. So if you remember, the Louisiana Territory was founded by the French, but they lost it at the end of the French-American War to the British. Then the British lost it at the end of the American Revolution to the Spanish. And in 1800, the Spanish signed a treaty with the French, giving the land back to them. So it's gone from the French to the British to the Spanish and now back to the French. And we have to make sure we have a good relationship with whoever controls that Louisiana Territory, because it borders the other side of the Mississippi River. And right now that is super, super important for trade and transportation, because water is the fastest mode of transportation at this moment. The only land transportation mode we have at this time is horses, and that is not nearly as quick as a ship. So we've got to be able to use the Mississippi River. So Thomas Jefferson sends James Monroe over to Paris to negotiate with the French and get a good trade agreement and treaty happening so that we can all have access to the Mississippi River. James Monroe sits down with Prince Talleyrand, who you remember from the XYZ affair. He was sent by Napoleon to come negotiate on France's behalf. And ultimately what Napoleon tells Talleyrand to offer him is, no, we don't want to make a treaty with you to trade along the Mississippi River. We would rather just give you the Louisiana territory. We don't want it. Napoleon's trying to conquer Europe right now. That's expensive, and it takes a lot of effort and energy. And he wants to be able to put all of his money and resources and focus into that and not have to worry about French territory on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. So Monroe tells Jefferson, and Jefferson really, tosses and turns over this. He's very torn because this would this is not something that's written in the Constitution. It doesn't say in the Constitution that the president has the power to buy land to increase the size of the country, or that he has the power to take land to increase the size of the country. And since Jefferson is a strict constructionist, that means that he does not have the power to do that in his mind. But he knows that this is a very important deal. They're offering it to us for a very low price. If they don't sell it to us, they might sell it to someone else. And they might not let us use the Mississippi River for trade. And if we do buy this, it will double the size of our country. So ultimately, after getting a lot of advice from all of his cabinet, Jefferson decides to take the deal, and we purchased the Louisiana Territory for $15 million, which ends up being something like less than 3 cents an acre, which is, quite a real estate deal or steal, if you ask me. So now that we've bought the Louisiana Territory, the question becomes, what's out there? We have never been out there. It's never been our territory before. We don't know what it looks like. We don't have any maps of the Louisiana Territory. Are there mountains? Are there rivers? How many Native American tribes are out there? Are they nice? Are they not nice? What is it like? So ultimately, Jefferson is going to hire some explorers to explore all of this Louisiana Territory. He's going to hire Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, Lewis and Clark, to head out into the Louisiana Territory and to try to find a water passage from the United States, from the Mississippi River, all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And what they're going to find, essentially, is the Missouri River, which turns into a couple of different rivers, but by using the Missouri River, you can use that to get all the way out here to the Pacific Ocean. So their journey, they'll set out in 1804, I do believe, and their journey is going to take a little over 2 years. It's a massive journey. They've got, quite a big group with them, maybe like 20 to 30 people in their travel group. On the way, they meet a Native American tribe and a woman named Sacagawea. Her husband is a French fur trader, and he says to Lewis and Clark, why don't you take my wife with you? She knows all of these different Native American languages, and she knows the land and everything, so she'll be really helpful. So Sacagawea, who's only 16 years old and is pregnant at the time, agrees to go with William Clark and Meriwether Lewis on their journey, and she even gives birth on the journey. Her baby's name is Jean-Baptiste, and everyone on the journey, as difficult as it may be, out here in the wilderness and uncharted territory in their mind, everyone makes it back alive except one person, and that one person didn't even die of anything crazy. They had like appendicitis. So they managed to make it all the way down the Missouri River and all the way out to the Pacific Ocean. And on the way, they discover hundreds of new types of plant life, new animal species. They see all of this beautiful landscape that the United States has never seen anything like this before. When they return, unfortunately, Meriwether Lewis sinks into a deep depression. He had always struggled with depression and anxiety and stuff, and he actually ends up killing himself. But William Clark always loved Lewis. He actually names his son Meriwether Lewis Clark, and he gets married and has kids, and he lives a pretty long and happy life. Other than Lewis and Clark, we do have one more explorer who's going to explore the Louisiana Territory. He'll explore this Mississippi Valley area, and that guy is Zebulon Pike. He will explore about 2,000 miles total worth of land in that area, but because it wasn't as new or crazy of a journey, we usually remember Lewis and Clark more than we remember Zebulon Pike.